I think I've come to the conclusion that mainstream conservatism is one of the downfalls of America. It's going to be part of it, right? And when I say mainstream conservatism, I'm not talking about, the nationalist right or, maybe like the paleo conservative stuff. The idea of preserving the people, the values. I'm talking about the mainstream sort of, I guess you can say Ben Shapiro types, or some of these other types, like the guy I'm about to quote here. You know, so there is a distinction there. It's the conservative type. The guy who values. Being popular and not getting called racist. And here we have a Timothy P. Carney. I guess he's a conservative. And, he did a thing, opinion. It's time to create a conservative ecosystem that doesn't welcome racists. And, Vox Day posted this, and, basically saying, if you ever doubted my assertion that a conservative is an individual who fears being called racist more than he fears God, the rape of his wife, the murder of his children, the destruction of his nation's economy, or the collapse of his society, this mule plea for a hard and bright line between conservatism and the defenders of the West should suffice to convince you of its truth. And you know what? I'll go ahead and I'll read the part he posted here. He didn't post everything; he just posted part of it. And he says, a handful. So this Timothy guy, right? Liberal commentators will always say conservatives are just a bunch of racists. This is a lie, but conservatives need to do a better job convincing the racists that it's a lie. A handful of conservatives, including quietly influential figures in important conservative institutions, were outed last week by leaked emails as participating in a pro-Hitler, nakedly anti-Semitic. Shut it down. Das ist nicht gut. Das ist nicht gut. Uh, and plainly racist email list. While liberal journalists are prone to inventing racism everywhere, this was no invention. uh, this was the article in Splinter by Hannah Geis was no smear. It was serious and fair reporting that ought to cause conservatives to ask what we are doing wrong. John Elliott, formerly of the Institute for Humane Studies and Intercollegiate Study, I don't know what that is, and Studies Institute, was a central figure in the story. IHS and ISI are respected and mainstream conservative institutions. Yeah, that's the problem. Thousands of conservatives and libertarian journalists and activists have passed through them. Hundreds of them received mentorship from Elliot. I've been friendly with Elliot for a decade. He's brought me in and gotten me paid to speak to students at both organizations. My first reaction upon reading the Splinter story was horror that otherwise sane-seeming people in the United States hold Hitlerian views. For what it's worth, Elliot apologized, probably didn't help, for the emails and said he no longer believed those things. I pray that's sincere. Gosh. You might want to read your Bible there a little bit more, man. I mean, I don't think God necessarily has a problem with racism, That's like a modern invention. I mean, you can really look at history. What is racism anyway? I guess you hate different people for something. Most people tend to dislike and distrust outsiders because they're outsiders. So I mean, you can not like it. You can say you think there's something wrong with that, but you should ask why you think that. Since that's completely modern. That's not, that's a very new invention and way of looking at the world. And anywhere it's been tried in history where you tolerate other groups, it's usually very decadent societies that are actually dying, right? So I mean that happened in the Arab Empire. If you don't know, they had like feminism, and I mean this is I think 1,000 or so years ago, but feminism and I don't know, like this, multi-ethnic thing, and the whole thing collapsed because empires tend to be multi-ethnic. That's why it's an empire. But anyway, so praise sincere. According to one former mentee, Gaius wrote, Eliot opened up to those he deemed red-pilled, a term used by white nationalists. Who knows what a white nationalist is? And so-called men's rights move activists to refer to someone who has been awakened to their cause. That's actually not what red pill means. This is like cringe. This is bad. This is not what red pill means. For those of you who don't know, red pill actually means it's kind of like, in the Matrix, the idea is that basically there's a blue pill and a red pill. The blue pill, if you take it, you just kind of wake up and back into the fantasy, right? You're in a fantasy. It's like somebody who calls themselves woke, that woke stuff. It's just somebody who's like downed the whole bottle of blue pills. They grabbed that straight off of Morpheus and just chugged it down. Red pill means that you kind of accept reality for what it is, right? You try to avoid the filter, right? And we all have our filters to look at things from, blah blah blah. But the red pill is kind of like, I think I was watching something, for example, like this girl, blonde in the belly of the beast, and this pretty white girl and all that, and I guess she wasn't really political, and she was traveling, and she was just sitting a certain way, and these like Muslim guys were like acting really inappropriate towards her, and this was in Austria, and this guy working at the, I guess it was a train station, and the Austrian guy working there came up to her and was telling her, oh, well, you're not supposed to sit this way, and because she had her feet on she was sitting like crisscrossed with her legs and stuff, and I don't know, I guess the Muslim guys didn't like that, or they're making inappropriate comments or something, kind of looking at you. You can tell when people are talking about you, if you don't know what it is. And she's saying, that was happening. And that this was like one of the first times she really was like, wait a minute, like these guys are like, looking over at me. I'm really uncomfortable. This is not, I guess it was something along those lines. Like, this is, I'm not even doing anything. Why am I getting scolded for doing nothing? Yet you won't go up to those guys. wait a minute, what's going on here? And I remember there was another girl, right? I think I'd heard about. I guess she was okay with like this whole refugee stuff, and then she went. She's into European, right? Like Romania, Eastern Europe, where that stuff is not really as promoted or really considered good. And I guess she went to Western Europe, where like Germany, where they're doing this, and she's like, well, what the hell? What is this? And she was shocked and appalled by the behavior. It was experience that opened her up to this, right? And that's essentially what red pill is. I remember traveling to been to a lot of places, but I remember being in a certain country. It's in Western Europe. I won't say where, for privacy reasons right now. But I was traveling with somebody who doesn't quite share the same views. Who's probably really like very mainstream, kind of liberally, maybe somewhat middle, is like very moderate. And we went to this country. Right, it's a white country, and we went to the city, and there were like no white people. I mean, it was all just literally, it was just all like Africans and Middle Eastern people, and when talking about it later, I was more like, well, that's bullshit, and they were like, oh, wow, I mean, that was well, you think, going to this country that you would find like the native population there, and we were talking about, they're like, I don't. And we were talking to somebody else about it, and it was like, he was like, I'm not, I don't mean it like racially or anything. It's just, I would think, if you go to a certain country, it would have the people there, right? Like, I go to France, there should be French people, and what was going on there? And that's red pilling to people, right? That's what red pill is. It's, wait a minute, this isn't, this isn't Sweden. Where are the Swedish people? Malmö, right? Sweden has like no Swedish people, I guess. I think it's like they're 1/3 of their own population in that city, right? They're only 30%, so less than 1/3, right? There were like grenade attacks and all these problems, and it's huge problem, right? And I've had that experience too. I've been to different places. I visited, and actually being around the people is the eye-opening experience. That's red pill. It's maybe things aren't always what we want them to be. That maybe people in the past weren't all just ignorant bigots up until the last 50 years, and then suddenly they became enlightened and woke. Like that's it's bullshit, right? And people, that's the recognition of reality is what red pill is. It's not somebody awakened to a cause. It's kind of considering like this blonde in the belly of the beast, or I think it was this other girl who was talking about this, right? And she was saying that I think it was either one of them or both of them were talking, and they said initially their first thought was, well, maybe we could do like a civic nationalist point of view, and kind of thought about it a little bit more and was like, oh, there's no historical example of this working. Oh well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the whole idea of just a racial point of view, like maybe Finland should be for the Finnish people, and other people have their countries too. I don't hate them or anything. Well, maybe that would be. Why, I don't know. I mean, we're supposed to be diversity, and so she's thinking about this, right? And she's like, I really don't have an argument as to why Finland can't just be for the Finnish people. I don't know. Like, what's wrong with that? And I think it was the Bell Blonde and the Bell AB said, like moving out to the country and moving away. It's basically, I think it was balkanization. I forget the term she used. Like, people don't want to call it that, but it is what it is. People racially segregating themselves, basically, right? And then that is what it is. People want to be around themselves, or people like them, right? They don't. It's not that they hate other people. It's just, it's the cafeteria room experiment, right? At a certain point, you have to accept that, oh gosh, wow, people just tend to prefer themselves. Not 100%, but mainly, right? There was that guy the liberal guy, right, sat on these results for years, right? Found out the diversity made people unhappy. And he didn't think that was going to be the results. Those were the results of his research. And he didn't want to talk about it. He was upset about that, right? For years, sat on this information, his studies, and, and see, this is the red pill, right? That would be the red pill, is thinking, oh, well, everyone's going to be happy and different. Oh, whoa, social trust goes down. There's crime goes up. People spend all day inside watching TV. They don't go out. They don't interact. They have less trust in their community, in their government. They're less happy with the government. Things like this. That's the red pill, right? It's not, I want this to be the case. It's just simply you look and you go, oh, well, I was wrong. Oh wow, well that's kind of painful. Whoa, what do we do now? Because I don't want to hate those people, and I don't hate those people. Maybe, but this isn't a workable situation. So that's red pill, right? So this guy already doesn't know what he's talking about. So my second reaction was, I'll continue reading now. Was, at least Elliot never suspected I was red pilled. Oh gosh. Oh, this guy is so pathetic. This guy is just. This is your typical conservative, mainstream conservative. Doesn't want to have too strong of an opinion. Still wants to be palatable. Won't really change anything. We got to get the Mexican vote and the black vote, and blah blah blah. And so don't say Trump. Don't say anything. Don't talk about deporting people illegally in the country too much. I mean, that's gonna upset them, and it's gonna upset our donors. Okay, our donors like the cheap labor. Okay, I know these people won't vote for us, and their children won't vote for us, and 4 generations later, here's another red pill. They're still voting for the Democrat Party majority. I think it goes down to like 58% for Hispanics. That's like the low point after 4 generations. It starts out like 80% Democrat support down to 58% support. So it's still a majority. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can say, well, there's more support now for Republicans after the 4 generations. 4 generations. Wow. Okay. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, is filled with lunatics who want to completely transform the country into a completely unrecognizable place. Things that don't work at all in history that have always led to the destruction of the society. Getting rid of the traditional population, culture, language, religion. That's never worked out in history. No example in history will you find where that works out well. And this is their plan, right? This is their plan, the official policy, right? And so yeah. So my second reaction was blah blah. My third reaction was, great. Now liberals are going to pay everyone who's gone through IHS, ISI, or the Daily Caller as racist. Just please don't call me that. I swear. I love different races, so that is the worst thing you could be. It's worse than original sin. It is original sin. It's in the Bible. I mean, just don't look in the Bible, because you might get, ethnic groups, who got slaughtered because they didn't, like Sodom and Gomorrah, because they became so evil and corrupt. And, in a lot of cases back then, cities were probably, city states, probably pretty equivalent to one race, or, a race of people. And, they got slaughtered and completely wiped off the earth because of what they did wrong. But, and God bless the Jews when they did that too, when they went and slaughtered some of these other groups that were evil and wrong, or when these other groups tried to, unjustly attack the Jews. God helped them even when they were outnumbered. I mean, you can just read the Maccabea, you know, but so, you know, oh, just please, racism is the worst sin. It's clearly it's in the Bible. Just don't read it, you know. But my fourth reaction was the unsettling one. Oh gosh, why the hell did racists seek homes in conservative and liberal institutions? Well, that's kind of a prerequisite for being a liberal, but okay. And don't give me this like, liberals, we're not race. No, no. You know what? When you lower standards for people, I mean, you can look at the whole thing where liberals will lower their vocabulary to talking to black people, and they come up with excuses like black people don't have access to internet, they don't know how to get to the DMV, and so therefore, if you require people to have a license in order to go to the to vote, it's gonna disenfranchise black people. It's just so. I mean, that's just like ridiculously offensive, right? I mean, that's just beyond the most racist thing you could possibly say. It's not even like a positive form of racism, like, well, I just have such sympathy. No, no. I mean, it is just complete. Well, I just really, because what it means is you deep down, if you're liberal and you think that, you basically think these people are just so fucking stupid that they can't figure out how to get a DMV license. Oh, I just can't figure that out, massa. What am I gonna do? Yeah, that's what you think about black people. I mean, that's just beyond racist. That's really worse than somebody who just says, supposedly all these white racists, right? Because I'm gonna address this because this guy's basically saying, you know, gosh, oh, these white people who think white people should have their own countries, white nationalism. White nationalism is stupid. Nationalism doesn't need a prefix, right? It's just nationalism. I believe all people should have their own countries, right? Peoples, right? The peoples. You have a common race, ethnic group, religion, language, culture, history. That's what it is. It's more than race, right? That's why you don't, like you can't have like an Asian nationalism, unless it's like a place like America where it's just like, well, we're belong to the same race, so it's the closest approximate, thing. If you look at Asia, it won't work, right? Because you have the Japanese, the Koreans, the Mongolians, the Vietnamese. They're just too different, right? Their cultures are different. They're totally different languages, totally different writing systems, different points of view, different values. You know, and now, if you were to try to compare it to something else, like an African, it's like, well, yeah, I guess we're closer to, the Vietnamese and Chinese are closer to each other than they are to, say, an African or Nigeria. Well, yeah, but, that doesn't make them the same, right? That's really irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, right? That's why, nationalism is that the Chinese should have their own country, the Hong Kongese too, the Vietnamese too, the Japanese, so on and so forth. That's just what nationalism is, right? It's just that respect for people having their own countries and self-determination, deciding the direction of it, right? But you know, so this guy is just, he doesn't even, oh, why did racism and racist views and snide liberals will chuckle and say something. I'll just finish because this is the last paragraph right here. It's not the whole article, but snide liberals will chuckle and say something like, because conservatism is racism. Yeah, because liberalism is just that snideness. Yeah, actually I'll finish reading this first. But the snideness and falseness of that answer shouldn't deter us from mulling over the question and doing something to make clear that conservatism and racism don't mix. No, conservatism and getting your wife fucked by the black guy so that you have to raise her black child, that's conservatism, right? That mixes. That if your red pill looks anything like Elliot's, you're not really welcomed here. Pretty soon you guys aren't going to welcome like Jesus Christ. I mean, you guys are literally going to reject Jesus Christ and God because God said, God wiped out those people. He didn't like what they were doing. They displeased him, and he created us, and he's above us, but yeah, that's horrible. Gosh. And So Vox Day, oh, Vox Day says that too. I know Christians are not. Actually, I'll read the Vox Day part first too. It's pretty short now. I know Christians are not welcome in conservatism. I know nationalists are not welcome in conservatism. I know that anyone who wants to restore the pre-1965 USA or the pre-European nations, he puts, is not welcome in conservatism. President Trump himself is not welcome in conservatism. I don't care. I am proud to say that I am not, and I have never been a conservative. Others tried to claim I am. I claim I was, and I always corrected them. I was not rejected by conservatives. I found them entirely unworthy and rejected them. So where do you stand? With the lukewarm, bootlicking conservatives whose highest principle is compromise, who have conserved absolutely nothing in the entire history of their political identity, or with Jesus Christ, the European nations, and the philosophical philosophical legacy of Greece and Rome. And if you're not given a spirit of fear, then why is your entire identity wrapped up in the fear of being called racist? Oh, if you are not given a spirit of fear, yeah, then why is your entire identity wrapped up in a fear of being called racist? Why do you insist on claiming that your children are no different than the dogs? That's a biblical reference, but yeah, basically, yeah, here's the thing, right? I remember, and this is actually really how I wanted to start the video, but I'll go in the story, right? When I was into some nerdier stuff, I wasn't super big nerd or anything, but it's pretty alpha always, but I was playing this game, right, a card game, and I remember going to the shop where they sell, those types of nerdy things, and I was playing, right? I went to play in a tournament and whatnot. I'm not not hardcore or anything, just kind of a regular tournament. And this weird conversation was going on. This guy was they're playing this card battle game, right? And the one guy was saying that something was cancer, and the other guy was like, "It's not cancer," and it wasn't like aggressive, but you could kind of see this back and forth. The guy was, I think the one guy was saying, that card is cancer. He was just like kind of bashing on the card. He didn't like it or something. And the other guy was like, "No, no, it's not. Not." It's kind of a weird play out, but it really suffices to show you the conservative movement, doesn't it? You might not see the relation, but I'll go ahead and explain it. You should after reading that guy's like really sad, why we're racism, you know, uh, because basically what happened was the one guy was saying something that the other guy didn't like, right? And it wasn't like a hardcore get upset and cry about it, but it was something that made the other guy kind of unhappy, right? And that's what's that's kind of why he was doing it. He was basically in control of the situation. He was the alpha nerd. He's the alpha nerd in that situation. And if you look at that, if why conservatives get called racist, right? And I mean, if you objectively look, I mean, you have so many conservative people who are just normal people who are like, "Why? I don't hate anyone. I just think that people should, maybe come to the country legally. I'm perfectly fine with becoming a minority, I guess, but I don't, I think people should maybe assimilate to our culture a little bit. Like, this is our country, and if we're gonna welcome them in, they should maybe respect our laws and values. I mean, that seems kind of fair. Like, I'm being the most conceivably rational form of generous here, and being really willing to meet in the middle as much as that's possible in this kind of a situation. And do they get like any sense of oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, 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 they should learn the language, they should respect the laws and values. Oh, okay, yeah, that's fair. No, no, it's like, that's racist. How dare you think somebody should assimilate? And it doesn't make sense, though, right? Because it's just supposed to be like you hate somebody. That was like the original meaning or something. It would never really made sense anyway, but that was kind of the original term of racism, right? And then you have this sort of weird usage to basically mean anyone, because it's like burn the witch, right? Oh, she's a witch, and that's basically what it means, right? And the reason, like with the nerdy thing, right? The nerd example is, if people can just call you something to get you to write these articles and to talk about how no you don't think that, you're opposed to that, and you're such a good person and you don't believe in this stuff, then people are going to take advantage of that, right? It's like why the left calls everyone Nazis now, right? It's because basically they know that people will get on their knees, they'll cry, they'll talk about how sorry they are that and I'm not a racist, and it's all the time, right? And people constantly do this stuff. They no, no, I don't, because you can get fired. I mean, you can get into real trouble for this stuff, right? And people might say, no, no, it's a racist society. Well, I mean, there was a guy I think a few years ago who put in a dating ad, right? He wasn't interested in fat women. This is before I think actually the whole body positivity nonsense started, and he wasn't interested in fat women or black women, right? And he got fired from his job for his personal dating, not wanting to date that. And you have this kind of stuff where like that girl, right? Chick-fil-A, I think she was a Mexican girl, so some of you might know this. I think it was Chick-fil-A, and basically she was the manager, Mexican girl, right? And she basically, these black guys came in and were trying to order, and I guess you get the food and then pay afterwards. But she was like, well, no, you're gonna have to pay first because you guys were diming and dashing. And they're like, nah, nah, man, nigga, what's your shit, man? I mean, literally just talking like that, like mega stereotype, right? And Chick Fil A fired her because one of them started, oh, well, oh shit, what be the magic words? Racism, yeah, that be racism that you don't want us to be giving us that free food, right? Even though we would technically have to pay, and they're just, it's like, like a normal interaction would just be to, oh, okay, yeah, I'll pay now. It's a little weird, but whatever, you know, and you would just kind of pay, or if that offended you so much, you would leave. And it turns out that obviously the reason they kept trying to push this is because they're trying to get her to give them the food so that they could dime and dash. And it turned out that, yeah, that's exactly what they were doing. She got fired. I think they hired her back afterwards. But, I mean, after that point, that's just such... who wants to work at their job anymore at that point? You get fired for doing nothing wrong. And so that happened, right? And so just being accused of this, right? It turns out it's total bullshit. It was obvious to anyone who had any common sense that, hey, these look like the guys who were stealing from the store. Maybe we should charge them before they give them their food. Why are they making such a big deal about it? She wasn't rude or anything, but just, oh, that's racism, got her fired. So I guess black beats Mexican. So, sucks. But I guess that's the hierarchy, right? Black beats everything. And so, yeah, so that's serious, right? They can get you fired. But one of the things is, acting like a really pathetic loser who lets everyone manipulate their emotions by being called a name isn't the solution to this stuff, right? It's to partly it's to stop caring. It's like, okay, I mean, like, wow, you're kind of off topic. If somebody tries to accuse you of this stuff, right, the correct thing to do is just to be like, okay, I next question. Like, okay, wow, that's weird. This guy's, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? What's he even talking about? Is he not aware of what the conversation is? And you maybe call somebody out like, oh, okay, yeah, well, what does that mean again? Can you give me a specific definition? Just call them out. Put them in a situation where they're not responding, and so other people can see that, right? Like in comment sections, you can do that. You can say, oh, okay, what does that mean again? Yeah, give me a definition. Explain how this person or how I meet it. Can you explain why that's bad, by the way? Because I'm really confused. You're just saying not liking other people, and that somehow that's bad. But what if somebody has a negative experience? So you're saying black people are bad because they don't like Jews, and they don't like, a lot of them don't dislike Jews, and they dislike white people. So therefore they're bad, right? Or a lot of them don't like Mexicans, so that's bad. A lot of Mexicans don't like blacks, so that's bad, right? That's racism then, right? You just put them kind of on a spot. I mean, you can do that, but for most part, it's just don't grovel like this and get really pathetic and no, we need to reject everything, and we just need to like find inner peace with our liberals or something. By the way, do you think this is going to make the liberals more likely to call you racist or less likely? I mean, let's just be honest here. Again, like what I've been saying, it's kind of like the psychology of it, right? Because you're allowing people to control your emotions. This is what people are going to do. They're going to call you racist for responding in this way, right? You just, it's like I don't get how people don't get this stuff. Like, I'm gonna go on this long write this long article and just base myself or whatever the word is. I just basically flog myself and I'm so sorry. That's gonna get you. That's gonna make you less mad, right? No, they're gonna do it again because you just showed them that you're weak. It's like sharks with blood in the water, right? You know how it goes. And But what I want to point out here is that why this destroys society, why America's screwed because of this stuff, is that because there's no answer for this, right? There is no solution to the problems that the West is facing. There are very, very real concerns to the society. And if all it takes for shutting down concerns about a Wall Street, for example, like, hey, these people are getting golden parachutes for screwing up companies. Yeah, I know the government policies don't always help, but there needs to be something done about, like, that these people should get arrested. Maybe these bankers who are way out of control in some of these cases, screwing up the economy or connected really deep with like the Federal Reserve, maybe they should get arrested. Maybe they should be taken out of the picture, and put into a prison cell with their assets liquidated. How about that? You know, because that's not appropriate, right? That's not appropriate for society. We have Hollywood, right? We have Hollywood gets tax breaks, all these special things. They have like this weird loophole where I think they didn't pay the guy who played originally Darth Vader, I guess is what he was saying, because what they do is this movie made all this money, right? Like the Star Wars movies made all this money, the originals, right? And so what basically they did though is they got real clever. They I forget exactly the process, but Hollywood will basically create a corporation around the movie and then lend the money out, and so that it can't get the money back, so it counts as a loss. It's like this weird process. Somebody else might be able to explain it better, but you know, basically stuff like that. And so, I mean, it's completely wrong, right? It's a complete tax evasion. It's completely wrong. I don't know if they all do it or if it's just some of them, but it's Hollywood, so we can suspect that's probably most of them. And it's totally wrong, right? I mean, it's totally unethical. It's a complete violation of kind of like the social contract, kind of social trust that you have a little bit of an obligation to pitch in. Hollywood, I'm sure gets benefits. I'm pretty sure they're able to shut down whole streets and things like that to do their little movies, and yeah, they get away with this kind of behavior, right? You have all these other problems with Hollywood. You have the problems with the elite, and if the only thing that somebody has to say in order to stop you from addressing these issues is, well, that's racism, I think is it Russia who has like a 13% flat tax. It just kind of makes sense, right? It's just, okay, flat tax. You know what you're going to pay. You don't need a huge, bureau of tax collecting to deal with this. It's just, kind of straightforward. I made X amount. Here's 13%. Very straightforward, small amount, not huge. People can pay it. People can afford it. Everyone has to pay, kind of a thing. So that makes sense, right? And if people want to reform the tax code, which is just insane in America, right? I mean, it's utterly insane. It doesn't even make sense. It encourages wastefulness. If all somebody has to do to fight you on that issue is call you a racist, you're going to deprive money from black people, how are you going to fix that? How are you going to fix the corruption with the elites? How are you going to fix the problem with tech giants, the corruption on Wall Street, corruption in the government? Again, racism. Whenever it's going to be a black guy, somebody just has to accuse you of racism, and you're going to write these little screedy, whiny little articles about, no, don't call me that. So what exactly is to differentiate these conservatives against liberals? What is their exact stance that they're not liberals? This is the main issue with mainstream conservatism. I'm going to wind the video down now, but this is the point I want to get to, is that this is the main problem with mainstream conservatism, right? Because it doesn't conserve anything. It's not about and other people have pointed this stuff out too. So it's not just me who's saying this. It's other people who've made these points, is that a lot of these people don't stand for anything, right? It's just basically, we're opposed to socialism, so that's their stance. They don't really have a direction. It's just, well, less government, but it's not based on a people. Whereas you look at people like Nick Fuentes, right? And I think he's basically what they call a paleo conservative, and basically that means it's a recognition, I guess, of the fact that yes, there is a unique American people. It's the people of the British descent. It doesn't mean modern British people. It means people of that descent primarily. Yes, you had some other European groups mix in there, but that's why English is spoken. That's why you have reservations for the Indians, because that's their land, right? They are a separate people. And it's recognition of that, and that if you change the people, right, the demographics are destiny. That's why the Democrats push for that kind of stuff, because they know that more Mexicans and more blacks will vote for them, even though long term they'll lose out because they'll end up getting replaced by Mexicans and blacks themselves. I mean, and then they'll get the shit tax out of them. But never mind. In the here and now, it's cool because they get votes. But it's a recognition that it's the people that matter, right? It's not like the land. Like Iceland's really poor. If you really look, Iceland historically is a very poor area. I mean, they have like no natural resources. It is literally the land of fire and ice. Are lava fields and glacier fields. I mean, the land is just there are barely any trees, if at all. It's not really, they're not really sure if there were that many trees when the Vikings were settled there. Maybe there were, maybe there weren't. There's some, you might read different things on that. Yet Iceland has somehow managed to become a rich, wealthy country despite having no natural resources. They didn't plunder Africa or any dumb shit like that. So, well, they benefited from being white. How? I mean, white people fought each other, killed each other, oppressed each other. Just look at the last century. I mean, how many tens of millions of white people died? Probably over 100 million white people died in the last century alone, just from the wars and the murders, particularly in Russia, in Eastern Europe, because of the Soviets, right? And so yeah, that the poverty there, they killed each other. So it's not like they were just all, oh, there's this big white club and we just all get along. And no, they hate each other. They wipe each other's languages out. They wipe each other's cultures out. I mean, the Romans wiped out how many people's languages? Not all the Romans' fault. A lot of people chose to learn that, the Roman language and whatnot. But it's so there isn't just some like magical white privilege. It doesn't even make sense, right? That's a very, looking at it from sort of an American perspective, and that's the problem, is that's not reality, right? And so that's kind of a red pill thing, is that if you want to get red pilled for like a liberal, that would be realizing that, oh well, historically these other people were oppressed too. But that's a little bit of a tangent. But it's like, how are places like this really rich? And gosh, I forgot, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, basically, yeah. So it's the people. There we go. So it's the people. Why is a place like Iceland rich, but a place like the continent of Africa, it's poor, right? Except for where the white people live. And how would they just magically suck the resources out of the country? I mean, they can't. The country's resources could easily be developed and used. The same thing with like Japan has no resources. They're not white. Korea has, it's a very small country, yet it's very prosperous. South Korea, not North Korea. In the case of political system in North Korea, is the majority is the fault. But that should be kind of a question, is so, if you change the people, it's going to look like where they're from, because the people make the place the way it is, right? And that's kind of the reality of life, right? It's a red pill for you. And that's why things like mainstream conservatism that reject that, they try to base the reality of their views on the liberal view of things, not on reality, but on how liberals, heavily influenced through Marx, that's what, cultural Marxism, right? That's how they try to look at reality. Of course, it's at odds with their own values. Well, we should lower taxes. Well, but how can you do that if you look at the world as basically being oppressor and oppressee and things like that? It doesn't work, right? So yeah, that's why the mainstream conservative stuff like this is bound to cause more problems, because not only will they not fight, they'll basically stab you in the back the moment you try to. So